Some people don't heal, they upgrade their defenses and call it healing. And that line is the perfect first keynote because it shocks the viewer out of a dangerous assumption. Most people believe healing is always good. They believe therapy automatically makes someone kinder, safer, more emotionally available. They believe working on myself means I'm becoming a better partner. And that belief is exactly why so many people stay stuck with avoidants who come back colder, more rigid, more self-focused, and more confident in their ability to dismiss your needs. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason this keynote hooks so hard is because it explains a painful phenomenon that viewers have experienced but couldn't name. They watch someone go to therapy, read attachment books, learn the language of boundaries, and instead of becoming more connected, they became more distant. Instead of becoming more accountable, they became more defensive. Instead of becoming more compassionate, they became more entitled. And the viewer sits there thinking, am I the problem? Am I not healed enough? Why does it feel worse now? Here's the truth. Healing is not a badge, healing is behavior. And if the behavior got colder, the relationship didn't get safer, it got more protected for them. When an avoidant upgrades their defenses, they learn how to protect themselves faster and more convincingly. They learn how to leave without guilt. They learn how to end conversations with authority. They learn how to label your needs as pressure. They learn how to frame your emotions as dysregulation. They learn how to use polished language to justify the same avoidant behaviors they had before, disappearing, stonewalling, breadcrumbing, refusing repair. Only now, they can sound mature while doing it. So what does this look like in real life? Before, they might have gone quiet and then come back apologetic, because guilt still existed. Before, they might have seemed confused, because they didn't have a narrative to defend their avoidance. After healing, the wrong way, they come back with certainty. They come back with a script. They come back with words that make you feel like you're violating something sacred just by asking for basic connection. They say things like, I'm protecting my peace. They say, I'm honoring my nervous system. They say, hey, I don't have capacity for this. They say, you're triggering me. They say, this is my boundary. And those phrases can be healthy when used with responsibility. But when used to shut you down, they're not healing, they're armor. They are a shield that blocks intimacy while pretending it's growth. That's why this keynote matters. It teaches the viewer to stop being hypnotized by language, because language is easy. A person can learn the vocabulary of healing in a weekend. But emotional maturity is proven only when it costs someone something, when they're uncomfortable, when they're triggered, when they have to take responsibility, when they have to stay present during conflict instead of escaping. Real healing makes someone more capable of closeness, not less. It makes them more accountable, not more righteous. It makes them more consistent, not more unpredictable. It makes them more respectful, not more dismissive. And if their healing made them harder to talk to, harder to reach, harder to feel safe with, then what likely happened is not emotional growth, it's emotional fortification. Now, why would an avoidant do this? Because for many avoidants, the goal is not intimacy, the goal is relief from discomfort. They are trying to regulate anxiety, shame, pressure, and vulnerability. Therapy can become a tool for growth, or it can become a tool for justification. If they enter healing with the intention to avoid discomfort rather than build capacity, they will take the parts that help them exit faster. They will take the parts that help them set one-sided rules. They will take the parts that help them feel righteous about detaching. This is the moment the viewer needs to hear something very clear. Someone can be healing and still be emotionally unsafe. Someone can be self-aware and still be inconsistent. Someone can know exactly why they avoid intimacy and still avoid it. Healing does not equal readiness for relationship. Healing equals responsibility plus practice plus time. Without those, healing becomes a label they wear, not a life they live. So this keynote also helps the viewer release guilt, because many viewers feel guilty for being hurt by the avoidance boundaries. They think, I should support their healing. But you are not obligated to accept a version of healing that harms you. You are not obligated to stay quiet so someone else can stay comfortable. You are not obligated to call neglect self-care just because they use a spiritual tone. And that is the real hook. It sets up the question the viewer must stay to answer. How do I tell the difference between real healing and defense upgrades? Because the danger is not an avoidant who is obviously avoidant. The danger is an avoidant who sounds enlightened while doing the same damage. The danger is a person who can shut you down with perfect words so you doubt your own reality. So the takeaway of this keynote is powerful. Stop asking, are they healed? Start asking, are they safe? Are they consistent? Are they accountable? Do they repair? Do they respect your needs? Do they create a bridge back after space, or do they create permanent distance with a polished explanation? Because real healing doesn't make someone harder to love. Real healing makes someone safer to love. And once the viewer understands that, they stop worshipping the label, and they start demanding the only thing that matters, behavior that proves intimacy is becoming possible, not just language that makes avoidance sound acceptable. A boundary has a bridge back, a wall doesn't, and this keynote is the one that helps the viewer stop getting confused by self-care that feels like abandonment. Because the most painful thing about a so-called healed avoidant is that they don't just pull away anymore, they pull away with confidence. They don't just go silent, they call it a boundary. They don't just avoid a conversation, they label you unsafe for wanting one. And if you don't know the difference between a boundary and a wall, you'll start doubting your own needs. You'll start apologizing for wanting basic communication. You'll start shrinking yourself to respect their healing, while your heart quietly bleeds out. Ladies and gentlemen, a boundary is not a weapon. A boundary is a structure that protects connection. It's not meant to end intimacy. It's meant to make intimacy sustainable. A boundary includes clarity, timing, and care. It says, here is what I need, and here is how we stay connected while I take care of myself. A wall says, here is what I need, and your needs don't matter. A wall shuts the door and calls it peace. So what does a healthy boundary actually sound like? It sounds like, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need a break. I'm going to take the evening to calm down, and I will call you tomorrow at 7. It sounds like, I can't continue this conversation if we're yelling, but I want to resolve it. Let's pause for 30 minutes and come back. It sounds like, I need space to think, but I'm not leaving you in confusion. Here's when we'll talk again. Notice the bridge. Notice the return plan. Notice the respect for the relationship. Now listen to what a wall sounds like. A wall sounds like, I need space. Don't question me. A wall sounds like, you're violating my boundaries by asking. A wall sounds like, I'm protecting my peace, I can't do this. Then silence, no timeline, no reassurance, no responsibility. A wall is not a pause, it's an escape. And here's the giveaway. Walls create uncertainty and anxiety in the other person, then blame them for being anxious. Walls punish closeness and call it healing. The viewer needs to understand why avoidants love walls. Walls give instant relief. Walls avoid discomfort. Walls prevent accountability. Walls allow someone to keep the benefits of a connection while refusing the duties of it. And when therapy language gets involved, walls become even more convincing, because they can sound wise while they are actually emotionally absent. This is why the phrase, a boundary has a bridge back, is so important. Because the bridge back is what proves the intention. A person who sets a boundary with a bridge is saying, I value us and I'm regulating myself so I can show up better. A person who sets a wall is saying, I value my comfort more than our connection, and I will disappear whenever things get real. So how does the viewer tell the difference in real time? Ask yourself 3 questions. First, does this create clarity or confusion? Second, does this include a timeline or leave you suspended? Third, does this protect both people or only protect one? Healthy boundaries reduce chaos. Walls increase chaos, then blame you for reacting to it. Here's a simple way to test it. When some need space, a healed person can answer one calm follow-up, I respect that. When will we reconnect? If they respond with care and specificity, you're dealing with a boundary. If they respond with anger, defensiveness, or vague refusal, stop pressuring me. You're triggering me. I don't know. Then you're likely dealing with a wall. Because a wall hates timelines. A wall hates accountability. A wall wants unlimited permission to withdraw without consequence. Now let's get even clearer. A real boundary doesn't erase your needs. It doesn't require you to go numb. It doesn't demand that you pretend you're fine being left in the dark. A real boundary makes room for your nervous system too. It sounds like, I know this is hard for you. I'm not leaving. I just need a moment. A wall doesn't soothe. A wall disappears and expects you to deal with it. This keynote is also about self-respect, because once you recognize a wall, you stop negotiating with it. You stop begging for basic reassurance. You stop trying to prove you're safe enough to talk to. You stop performing emotional perfection to earn communication. Instead, you respond with your own structure, calm, firm, adult. Something like, I respect your need for space. I also need clarity and consistency. If you need time, tell me when we'll reconnect. If you can't offer that, I'm stepping back because I won't do undefined silence. That one response does something powerful. It doesn't attack them. It doesn't invalidate their nervous system. It simply refuses a one-sided relationship where only one person's comfort matters. It forces the truth into the light. Either they build a bridge back, or they reveal they were never trying to stay connected in the first place. And here's what the viewer must remember. You're not asking for constant access. You're asking for basic relational safety. You're not demanding they never need space. You're requiring that space doesn't become abandonment. You're requiring that healing doesn't become a free pass to hurt you with confidence. Because real healing doesn't build walls. Real healing builds bridges, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's scary. Even when someone has to grow up and learn how to come back. They learned emotional language, not emotional responsibility. And this keynote is where the viewer finally understands why a healed, avoidant can sound evolved while feeling more unsafe than ever. Because language can change fast. Vocabulary can be learned in a weekend. Anyone can watch a few videos, read a few posts, and start speaking fluent therapy. But responsibility is different. Responsibility is proven in moments of discomfort. Responsibility shows up when it's triggered and still chooses respect. Responsibility is behavior under pressure, not words in a calm moment. Ladies and gentlemen, weaponized therapy language is one of the most confusing things to experience because it makes you doubt yourself. Before, an avoidant might just disappear and you could name it as distance. But now they disappear with a reason that sounds legitimate. They shut down and call it regulation. They refuse a conversation and call it a boundary. They dismiss your feelings and call it protecting peace. And because the words sound mature, you start questioning your own reality. You start thinking, maybe I am toxic for wanting to talk. Maybe I'm not healed enough. Maybe I'm triggering them. And this is exactly how language becomes a tool of control. Here's the core difference. Emotional language is the ability to name feelings and concepts. Emotional responsibility is the willingness to manage your behavior so you don't harm people you claim to care about. Emotional language says, I'm triggered. Emotional responsibility says, I'm triggered and I'm going to handle it without punishing you. Emotional language says, I need space. Emotional responsibility says, I need space and I'm going to tell you when I'll return. Emotional language says, this is a boundary. Emotional responsibility says, this boundary protects both of us, and I'm still committed to repair. So what does weaponized language look like? It looks like using psychological words to shut you down instead of understand you. It looks like diagnosing you instead of listening. It looks like turning every concern you bring up into a label about your wounds, so they never have to face their impact. It looks like this, you say, when you go silent for days, it hurts, and they reply, you're anxiously attached and you need to self-soothe. You say, I need clarity, and they reply, you're trying to control me. You say, I feel dismissed, and they reply, that's your projection. Do you see what happens? Your experience becomes the problem, not their behavior. Your needs become pathology, not information. That's not healing, that's deflection with fancy words. And why is this so dangerous for the viewer? Because it reverses the roles. You end up doing all the work. You end up walking on eggshells so you don't trigger them. You end up silencing your needs so you don't violate boundaries. You end up apologizing for normal emotional responses. And the avoidant gets to remain emotionally unavailable while appearing morally superior. They look like the wise one. You look like the messy one. That imbalance is not intimacy. That imbalance is control. Now, here's the critical point. There are phrases that are genuinely healthy when used correctly. I don't have capacity right now. Can be healthy if it comes with a bridge back. I feel dysregulated. Can be healthy if it's followed by repair. I need space. Can be healthy if it includes reassurance and timing. But when these phrases become full stops instead of doorways, they're being used as escape routes. The phrase becomes a wall, not a bridge. And the outcome is always the same. You're left alone in uncertainty, carrying the emotional weight while they call it self-care. Ladies and gentlemen, real healing makes people more able to tolerate accountability. Fake healing makes people more allergic to it. A person with emotional responsibility can hear, that hurt me, and stay present. They don't instantly defend, vanish, or label you. They ask questions, they take ownership, they try to repair. They might still need time, but they will not punish you for having feelings. They will not use your vulnerability as evidence that you're unhealed. So how does the viewer tell the difference quickly? Watch what happens after the therapy phrase. If they say, I need space, do they give a timeline and return, or do they disappear indefinitely? If they say, I'm protecting my peace, do they still consider your peace, or does your peace get sacrificed every time? If they say, this is my boundary, does it create structure for both of you, or does it only protect their comfort while you suffer in confusion? If they say, I'm triggered, do they regulate and come back to repair, or do they use it as permission to stonewall? Here's another test. Emotional responsibility includes accountability language. You'll hear phrases like, I'm sorry, I understand. I didn't handle that well. I want to do better. Here's what I'll do next time. Weaponized language includes superiority language. You'll hear, you're projecting. You're unhealed. You're violating my boundary. You're too much. You're the reason I shut down. One invites connection, the other ends it. And this keynote keeps viewers watching because it promises protection. It tells them, you're not crazy for feeling like it got worse after they healed. It got worse because they gained tools to defend without looking bad. They learned the right words without learning the right behavior. They learned how to exit with confidence. They learned how to silence you while sounding calm. And once you can see that, you stop arguing with vocabulary. You stop trying to win a debate about who is more healed. You start measuring what actually matters. Are you safe? Are you respected? Is there repair? Is there consistency? Because the real mark of healing is not how beautifully someone can describe their trauma. The real mark of healing is whether they can stay accountable when your heart is on the table. They did a few healing things and now feel righteous, so they lecture instead of repair. And this keynote is the one that explains why some avoidants become harder to talk to after they start working on themselves. The viewer often describes it like this: they act like they're above emotions now. They speak like a therapist. They make me feel like I'm the problem. They don't apologize anymore, they diagnose me. And the reason this happens is not always because they healed deeply. Sometimes it's because they experienced a psychological trap, moral licensing, plus a superiority shield that protects them from shame. Ladies and gentlemen, moral licensing is when someone does one good thing and subconsciously feels entitled to do something selfish. It's like the mind says, I went to therapy, I read a book, I learned about attachment styles, therefore, I am a better person now. And once someone feels like a better person, they can start feeling justified. They can start feeling like they've earned special permission. Permission to be rigid. Permission to be less considerate. Permission to put their comfort first. Permission to avoid accountability because, in their mind, they're already doing the work. So the avoidant begins to act like their healing journey itself is proof that they don't need to change their behavior in the moment. They'll say things like, I'm doing my best. I'm healing. I'm setting boundaries. And they use that as a blanket to cover everything, including behavior that still hurts you. And when you try to express impact, when you say, this hurts, this is confusing, I need consistency, they don't soften, they don't get curious, they don't repair, they lecture. Because lecturing is safer than feeling. Repair requires vulnerability. Repair requires admitting you caused pain. Repair requires staying in discomfort. Lecturing flips the power. Lecturing puts them above you. It turns the conversation into a lesson where you are the student and they are the teacher. And if they can make you the student, they don't have to be accountable. They don't have to face guilt. They don't have to face shame. They can stay protected. This is why healed avoidant superiority can feel so cold. Before, they might have been avoidant with confusion. They might have been inconsistent but still guilty. They might have been distant but still somewhat human in their uncertainty. After they become avoidant with certainty, they become avoidant with moral high ground. They speak in calm tones while dismissing your feelings, and the calm tone tricks you into thinking they're right. Because calmness looks like maturity. But calmness can also be emotional shutdown. The viewer needs to understand what superiority does in relationships. Superiority kills intimacy. Because intimacy requires equality, two humans with needs, two nervous systems, two hearts that matter. When someone becomes superior, the relationship becomes one-sided. Their feelings become facts, your feelings become problems. Their boundaries become sacred. Your boundaries become control. Their triggers become reasons to disappear. Your triggers become work you need to do. And slowly, you start disappearing too emotionally. You become careful. You become quiet. You become smaller so you don't get judged. Ladies and gentlemen, a truly healing person becomes more humble, not more righteous. Healing makes you realize how much you don't know. Healing makes you more compassionate with other people's wounds. Healing gives you the ability to say, I'm sorry, without collapsing into shame. Healing gives you the strength to hear feedback without making it an attack. A person who is genuinely growing doesn't use therapy language to win. They use it to connect. So what does moral, licensed superiority look like in real moments? You say, when you shut down for 3 days, I feel anxious, and they reply, you need to regulate your anxious attachment. You say, can we talk about what happened? And they reply, I don't have capacity for this because you're dysregulated. You say, I need reassurance, and they reply, that's codependency. Notice what happens. They label, they diagnose, they distance. They don't hold space for your experience. They use concepts as weapons to avoid the emotional responsibility of being in a relationship. Now, here's the painful part. Some viewers will try harder when they meet this. They'll think, maybe if I learn more about healing too, they'll take me seriously. So they start reading, watching, self-analyzing, trying to become perfect. And the relationship turns into a constant self-improvement project where you are always trying to be less triggering, less needy, less emotional. But that doesn't create intimacy, it creates compliance. And this keynote exists to break that spell. Because the truth is, if someone uses healing as a superiority shield, you cannot argue them into humility. You cannot explain your way into being respected. The only thing that disrupts superiority is standards, calm standards. You respond with something like, I respect your healing journey. I also need mutual respect. If we can't talk about impact without you diagnosing me, this isn't emotionally safe for me. That sentence does not attack their growth. It simply names what is required for connection, mutuality. And here is the final test of whether their healing is real. A genuinely healing person will hear that and reflect. They may stumble, but they will try. They will ask, what do you need? They will take responsibility. A morally licensed avoidant will get defensive, withdraw, or blame you because their priority is not connection, it's control. So this keynote keeps viewers engaged because it validates what they felt but couldn't explain. The relationship didn't get safer, it got more one-sided. And once you see the superiority trap, you stop confusing someone's calm lecture with emotional maturity. You start watching for the only thing that matters. Do they repair? Do they listen? Do they stay accountable when it's uncomfortable? They can explain their wounds perfectly and still be emotionally unsafe. And this keynote is where the viewer finally stops being hypnotized by insight. Because insight feels impressive. Insight sounds like progress. Insight makes you believe something is changing. When someone can name their childhood patterns, talk about their triggers, describe their attachment style, and even cry about their fears, your heart wants to believe that awareness equals transformation. Your heart wants to believe. If they understand themselves, they'll treat me better. But many people have learned the hardest lesson. A person can be deeply self-aware and still behave in ways that damage your nervous system. Ladies and gentlemen, self-awareness is a mirror. Self-improvement is a muscle. A mirror shows you what's there. A muscle changes what you do. And in relationships, what matters is not how well someone understands their behavior, but whether they can regulate it when it counts. Because the moment that matters is not when they're calm and reflective. The moment that matters is when they're triggered, overwhelmed, or feeling exposed, and they still choose respect instead of escape. So the viewer needs to understand why self-awareness can become a trap. Self-awareness without responsibility turns into a story that explains why they do what they do. And when you love someone, you start protecting the story. You start making excuses for the pattern because you understand the cause. You start saying, they had trauma, they're fearful, they're avoidant, they're learning. And before you realize it, you're living in a relationship where you have endless compassion for their wounds, but not enough protection for your own well-being. This is exactly how avoidants become worse after they heal. They gain the ability to narrate themselves beautifully. They gain the ability to say, I'm triggered, I'm dissociating, I'm dysregulated, my attachment is activated, and those statements can be true. But truth is not the same as repair. Naming a trigger does not excuse the behavior that follows it. Awareness does not give someone a free pass to stonewall, disappear, or punish you with silence. And here's the most important distinction. A self-aware but unsafe person uses awareness to justify. A safe person uses awareness to change. A self-aware but unsafe person says, I'm avoidant, so I need space, and then leaves you in confusion for days. A safe person says, I'm avoidant, I feel the urge to pull away, but I care about you, so I'm going to take an hour and then I'll come back. Do you feel the difference? Both are aware. Only one is responsible. A self-aware but unsafe person says, you triggered me, and then blames you for their reaction. A safe person says, I was triggered, and I didn't handle it well, I'm sorry, here's what I'll do next time. Self-awareness becomes safety only when it is paired with accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, some avoidants become experts at explaining their wounds because explanation is a form of control. If they can explain their behavior, they can soften your anger. If they can tell you a trauma story, they can activate your empathy. If they can sound emotionally intelligent, they can make you doubt yourself. They can keep you invested in their progress narrative, even while your daily reality remains uncertain. And the viewer's nervous system feels that uncertainty as anxiety, rumination, obsession. You start thinking about them all day. You start waiting for the next mood shift. You start measuring your words so you don't trigger them. You start living around their limitations. This is why we say, safe is the standard, not healed. Someone can be in therapy and still be unsafe. Someone can have a diagnosis and still be unsafe. Someone can talk about healing and still be unsafe. The only proof of safety is pattern, not a promise, not a realization, not a beautiful conversation at midnight. Pattern. Do they return when they say they will? Do they communicate during conflict? Do they repair after harm? Do they respect your needs? Do they treat your feelings like information or like an inconvenience? Do they make you feel calmer over time or more anxious? Now the viewer will ask, but what if they're trying? Great question, because trying matters, but trying has evidence. Trying looks like consistency increasing over time. Trying looks like them catching themselves mid-withdrawal and communicating. Trying looks like them choosing discomfort with you rather than relief without you. Trying looks like them taking feedback without disappearing. Trying looks like them building skills, not just collecting language. And if you're not seeing those shifts, if you're seeing the same cycle with more sophisticated explanations, then you are not watching healing. You are watching self-awareness being used as protection. You are watching the person become better at understanding their avoidance without becoming better at loving you through it. So what does the viewer do with this keynote? They stop negotiating with insight. They stop being impressed by reflection alone. They stop falling for "I know I have issues" as proof that the issues won't keep hurting them. Instead, they decide a new rule: empathy does not require self-abandonment. You can understand someone's wounds and still require safe behavior. You can respect their journey and still protect your peace. Because ultimately, you can't build a relationship on explanations. You build it on repeated choices. You build it on consistency. You build it on repair. You build it on someone who doesn't just know their patterns, but is willing to change them when your heart is on the line. Is this boundary helping us stay connected in a healthy way, or helping you avoid the relationship? And this keynote is the final payoff because it hands the viewer one clean question that cuts through every excuse, every polished therapy phrase, every cold shutdown disguised as growth. Most people get stuck arguing about words. They argue about what space means. They argue about whether capacity is real. They argue about whether they're being too much. And while they argue, they stay emotionally trapped. This question ends the debate and exposes the intention, because a boundary is only healthy if it serves connection, not avoidance. Ladies and gentlemen, real healing doesn't use boundaries to escape intimacy. It uses boundaries to make intimacy safer. Real boundaries have structure. They have timelines, they have care. They have a bridge back. Walls don't. Walls disappear and call it peace. Walls leave you confused and then blame you for being confused. Walls protect one person's comfort at the expense of the relationship. So the one question you ask is not a confrontation, it's a filter. It filters out therapy armor and reveals whether the person is ready to be a partner or only ready to protect themselves. Now here's why this question is so powerful. It forces clarity without aggression. You are not saying, "You're lying." You're not saying, "Your healing is fake." You're not attacking their nervous system. You're asking for the real purpose of the behavior. Are we moving toward connection, or are we moving away from it? Are we building something, or are we avoiding responsibility? A healed person can handle that question. An avoidant hiding behind healing language will usually react with defensiveness, vagueness, or punishment, because the question threatens their ability to keep control without accountability. So what happens when you ask it? If the boundary is genuine, they will respond with specifics. They will say something like, "I'm overwhelmed, but I care about us. I need tonight to calm down and I want to talk tomorrow at 7. They will offer a timeline. They will offer reassurance. They will show you the bridge back. They might still be imperfect, but they will be oriented toward repair. They will not weaponize your need for clarity. They will not label you unsafe for asking. If it's a wall, you will feel it immediately. A wall hates specificity. A wall hates timelines. A wall hates accountability. They will say, "Stop pressuring me. You're violating my boundary. You're controlling. You're triggered. You need to self-soothe." And then they will disappear or shut you down. Because their goal isn't to stay connected. Their goal is to end the discomfort. And the fastest way to end discomfort is to make your needs the problem. Now the viewer needs to understand something very important. This question is not about winning. It's about protecting your peace. Because many viewers are still emotionally addicted to the idea that if they say the right thing, they can finally unlock the avoidant. They believe the relationship is a puzzle. They believe if they become healed enough, calm enough, patient enough, they'll finally be chosen. But the truth is you cannot turn walls into bridges with perfect communication. Only the other person can choose to build the bridge back. That's why the question is so powerful. It stops you from performing. It stops you from auditioning. It puts the responsibility where it belongs. If someone claims healing, they should be able to hold a respectful conversation about connection. If they cannot, then your next step becomes clear. You don't argue, you decide. And here's the next layer. You have to be willing to follow the truth the question reveals. Because if you ask this question and they give you a wall, And you still chase. You teach them that walls work. You teach them that all they need is the right vocabulary to keep you in limbo. You teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. So the real power isn't the question. The real power is what you do after the answer. So let's give the viewer a calm script that matches the keynote. If they say, "I need space," you respond, "I respect that. I also need clarity. Is this space helping us stay connected in a healthy way or avoiding the relationship? If it's space, tell me when we'll reconnect." That's respectful. It honors both nervous systems. It doesn't demand immediate closeness. It simply requires adult structure. If they respond with a bridge, you proceed slowly. You watch consistency. You see if they actually return. You see if they repair. You see if their boundary protects both of you, not just them. But if they respond with a wall, defensiveness, blame, silence, you don't escalate, you don't beg, you don't write paragraphs. You calmly state your standard: "I'm not available for undefined silence or one-sided boundaries. If we can't communicate with respect, I'm stepping back." Then you step back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how you stop being trapped by a person's healing narrative. Because the truth is, healed is not the standard. Safe is the standard. Connected is the standard. Respectful is the standard. A person who is truly healing can still make mistakes, but they will not use healing as a reason to abandon you. They will not use therapy language to silence you. They will not protect their peace by destroying yours. This keynote keeps viewers watching because it delivers something they can use immediately. Not just knowledge, but protection. It gives them the final clarity. If the boundary helps the relationship, it will come with a bridge back. If it avoids the relationship, it will come with walls and blame. And when you can see that clearly, you stop trying to be understanding at the cost of your sanity. You stop accepting coldness as growth. You stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. You become the kind of person who respects healing but refuses avoidance. And that is what real healing looks like, not just in them, but in you.